One of the great fallacies of combining academics and behaviors is thinking that behaviors occur on the same grading cycle as academics. And that's a common misnomer that we expect our kids, because they're moving on to the fourth grade, to have that maturity level of a fourth grader. It's oftentimes just not going to happen. So putting a timeline on it really diminishes what's supposed to be happening, which is the individualization. Social and emotional, even in a small group setting, it's the reason why you use the assessments to create your small group. One-on-one settings, even in a classroom setting, is supposed to still be individualized based upon the need of a student. Once again, that's why the assessing processes are important. You don't look at it from a timeline perspective, you look at it from a perspective of achievability as far as deficit areas. And based on those deficit areas, you teach against it. Now then, another part of the question was, well, how long does it take a kid to engage in that? You would be amazed how quickly kids will engage at social and emotional engagement points. Take a kid that you're working with on math, put them at the board, say, hey, do this problem. There's not an engagement point anywhere in there unless they're just math-centered. Take a kid and you have in there the pedagogy of LEAP's lessons, which is probative, informative, probative, assimilative. And let me explain that. When a lesson is taught, a teacher doesn't walk in and say, hey, here's your problem, wall goes up. You're talking social. No one wants to be told they're not socially acceptable. Instead, it's probative. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a kid who has anger problems, or maybe they're a kid who has difficulty being around someone who's angry. We actually have a lesson called Contact with an Angry Person. The LEAP's lesson will tell the teacher how to walk in the room, put your books down hard, slam your chair under the desk, sit down and be quiet, I've had a bad day. And about the time the kids are ducking, stop and says, what just happened? And see what has happened now, there's an engagement point. These kids are saying, whoa, what's going on? And all of a sudden, you can begin talking about, you've just been in contact with an angry person. So we go from probative to informative. Now we're honing in on the specific thing we're going to be learning. But rather than saying, so here's what you do about it. Once again, that wall goes up. You're too old, you're from the wrong side, you're not me. And so we go back into probative saying, so what do we do about it? And here's where LEAPS differs from a lot of programs. You don't just tell them to come up with the right answers. That's not real life. Kids make bad choices. In that probative, what are you going to do about it? You're in a controlled environment. Let them make the bad choices. From those bad choices, they can then in turn work with you for the final part, which is assimilative. What is the consequence of that choice? I've made a bad choice. Here's the consequence that you're going to have. Well, I don't want that. Okay, let's come up with a better choice. That's problem solving. What you have done at that point through the engagement is taken the kid back to the antecedent event which caused the start of the conversation, the first engagement point, got them to identify it, helped them identify it through definition, helped them identify different potential solutions, many more engagement points in there, let them make choices, then upon the application of those choices, create consequences in a controlled environment. And what you've done is you've altered their experiential knowledge base. You've created an experience. When you can create an experience for a student, you can engage them. That's why the years of putting in the half-hour anger management video, thinking it's going to make kids less angry, doesn't work. You can't change behaviors in passivity. A great example, you don't take a group of smelly 12-year-old boys and give them a hygiene crossword puzzle and think they're going to smell better by the end of it. You've got to actively engage the kids, create the engagement points. When you get the engagement point, teach, but it's got to be purposeful. Probe them, get them to identify the problem. Problem identification, step number one. Help them to, define it. That's the maturity. Once they've defined it, come up with a solution. Problem solving, huge part of RTI, MTSS, PBS, and life. And then once you're in the problem solving mode, understand consequences, then make the choice. Because they've understood consequences, they've made a choice, you've altered their experiential knowledge base. Now when they're in a similar setting in life, they've been there and done that. They've seen what happens when you make bad choices, even in a controlled setting, and they understand the type of choice they're supposed to make. Then if they make a bad choice, consequences apply. Consequences then become a good mechanism to alter behaviors. Minus that, consequences don't.